Hey guys, welcome back. So for this one, we are getting into the conclusion of the first arc of Kieran Gillen's Immortal X-Men, which from here will take us into Sins of Sinister, which is an event that we've more or less been waiting for since Hickman's Powers of 10. When we were told about the Sinister line, or timeline, which looks very similar to what we're seeing unfold here. And with that said, let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so for this one, we come back just after Sinister's timeline save scum, which took us through 9 versions of Sinister trying to kill off the Quiet Council, and eventually on his 10th, he had managed to take out what he expressed to be as many as he needed. And like we'd seen afterwards, he'd bamfed out of there and made his way back to his secret lab. But throughout the entirety of Immortal X-Men, all the way to this point, we were never told why Sinister was doing this. And here in issue 10, which is the conclusion of the first story arc of Immortal X-Men, heading into Sins of Sinister, originally here we're not given the full explanation, it's rather just teased and ended with a cliffhanger, which then takes us over into Sins of Sinister issue 1. But instead of us doing the whole cliffhanger, song and dance, for this one we're gonna make it a bit more conclusive. So first we're gonna talk about what's happening, and then I'm gonna get into a more clearer explanation than what we've been shown in Immortal X-Men, so that when we begin Sins of Sinister this week, there won't be any residual confusion. But from here we pick up with Sinister, who's made his way back to his secret lab just after his Save Scum massacre. And when he gets here, he requests for his machine to bring forth Moira number 7 so that he can now create a new save point so that he doesn't lose the progress that he's gained, of which, like he'd mentioned before, he's satisfied with to this point. But also with doing this, Sinister wants to make sure that if things go left in the near future and he needs to save Scum again, that he'll come back to this moment instead of going all the way back to where he'd have to attack the Quiet Council again, or even, God forbid, go back before Judgment Day. So with Sinister coming here, he brings forth Moira number 7, he makes a new backup, and it works rather seamlessly, but then he leaves from here in quite the hurry, because now he needs to play out the other part of his plan. But as we continue, we're then given narration that's coming from Charles Xavier, and with how this is done, it's really like this monologue that Charles is giving over a sequence of events that we see taking place over the course of this conclusion. But as we see Sage, Beast, Domino, and Cable sorting through the aftermath of this slaughter, it's here where Cable takes Hope's body and he gives a speech to the people of Krakoa, which for us is inaudible, because once again, it's more like a montage visually taking place. We instead hear from Xavier. And in Xavier's monologue, he's saying things like, "Are you suspicious of me? I hope so. After all, I have done much to be suspicious of. It is one of my ways of protecting everyone. People should be suspicious of me. Let me explain." And then he goes on to talk about how he's an idealist, but experience has taught him to be practical. And even though you have the Xavier's dream, he knows what the world thinks about mutants, and he knows what the world thinks about him. But regardless of the Xavier's dream of mutants and mankind coexisting peacefully, Charles goes on to say that he knows that that's just a dream, and he didn't create the X-Men to necessarily fulfill that dream, but instead for them to fight for a world where that dream or any dream could come true. But also at this point, when we go back to the real-time events, with Charles, Exodus, Hope, and Emma gone, it comes down to the point in Arbor Magna where somebody needs to step in for Hope and complete the resurrection process so that they can come back. But when it boils down to it, no one's really leaping at the opportunity to fill Hope's shoes. And for example, we see Mimic, who gets overwhelmed and takes off, saying he can't do it. And soon after we find that Sync ends up doing it. And even for him, he's not 100% sure himself, but it's really one of those cases where if not him, then who else? Because without Hope, the 5 are incomplete, and someone needs to sync them together. But also, as a reminder, we're shown the top secret resurrection redundancy protocol, where the genetic base is originally provided by Sinister, which is a significant detail that we'll get back to. But then next you have the members of the 5 who grow a new body for that individual, and then finally the mind is restored from that individual's backup, of which there are multiple, which is a redundancy that's been there from the beginning. But also with how the resurrection process is set up at the moment, Sync and Mimic are on the front lines to replace any member of the 5 who may have died or gone missing. And had it been Egg, Proteus, Elixir, or Tempest, the stand-in process would have been more simple. But with Hope being a more unique deviation and the member of the 5 who synergizes the process, her involvement has been so critical because at times in the past when they tried it without her, it didn't work. And with them focusing on bringing back Hope first, this is where the nervousness is coming from, because if they can't bring Hope back, then Resurrection is done. it's over. Which once again really leans into the idea of her being the mutant messiah, because aside from her being the first mutant born after M-Day, she's now also the most important member of the Five because she's the hardest to replace. But fortunately, this method of resurrecting her, it works. And when it's announced that Hope's alive, all of Krakoa rejoices, and shortly after she's back, they fill her in on what happened. And soon after, she helps to bring back Charles, Exodus, and Emma, because they put her back to work right away. But shortly after this, we then see the X-Men going after Sinister, with Destiny letting them know that he retreated back to his old underground lair in Alaska, which for the most part at this time is completely wrecked because of the events with the Phoenix Five. But again, Sinister didn't come here in an attempt to truly escape, but as it stands for the moment, he needs to make it look that way. So with all the X-Men coming after him, he makes it seem like he's putting up a resistance. He throws out all kinds of abominations to fight them off, but at no point did he truly want or have the desire to actually get away. But nonetheless, he puts on the performance and he puts on the show because he needs everyone, with the exception of a few, to believe that he was stopped and believe that he had actually been apprehended. Because with doing this, it would make it seem like it's all over. Because for Sinister, he needed to kill multiple members of the Quiet Council, and we'll talk about why in just a little bit. But with Sinister needing multiple members of the Quiet Council dead, he knew that regardless of whatever way that he would have chosen to do it, the trail would have led back to him. But on top of that, with the multiple tries that he'd went through, we also know that it kind of had to be something extravagant to actually work. And with him killing them off in a very conspicuous way, he couldn't just turn himself in. He had to make it look like he ran. He had to make it look like he resisted. He had to sell the idea that things were not going exactly the way that he'd planned. Because finally, with Sinister knowing that he would go before the council, they would send him to the pit, and most of everyone would believe that this situation was taken care of and handled. But now, with Sinister being sentenced, it's here where the true revelations begin to unfold. Because shortly after Sinister goes down into the pit, Destiny tells Mystique that they have to get out of here. And in this moment, we don't see Destiny explain it to Mystique, but instead the two of them just get out of there quick, fast, and in a hurry. And after that, we then go back to Charles, who we see remove Cerebro from his head, only for us then to find that he has the Sinister diamond on his forehead. And so now originally this is how Immortal X-Men concludes. There's this cliffhanger that just sends us off into Sins of Sinister. But instead, I want to take a few minutes to explain what this ending actually means, pertaining to Immortal X-Men issues 1 through 10. Because for Sinister, with him cloning different Moiras, so that if something went wrong, he could just restart the timeline, make adjustments, and move forward, this was his contingency for the larger plan, with multiple Moiras sustaining a number of timeline resets, so that if needed, or when needed, Sinister could kill one of them off and he could start over. But the most significant moment that shows us the plot heading forward into Sins of Sinister is when he successfully killed the members of the Quiet Council, with that being Hope, Charles, Emma, and Exodus. Because with the Resurrection Redundancy Protocol truly starting with Sinister, who provides the genetic base for every resurrection, this means from the beginning the Resurrection Protocol has been at his mercy. But because he couldn't attempt to do this one at a time without being made or getting caught, he needed to make sure that this was done starting from the head, starting from the Quiet Council, and if not all of the members, then he needed to make sure that the significant ones were covered so that when they came back, they would have Sinister's DNA embedded within their own. And with Sinister putting on the front of trying to get away and trying to show resistance, Charles, Emma, Hope, and Exodus were already compromised. And from their recent resurrection going forward, they had just been playing along with Sinister's front and voting to send him to the pit so that in the meantime, others could be killed and converted through resurrection until enough people are infused with Sinister and then they can set him free. So yeah, it's very much a Sinister secret invasion that we're heading into here, because aside from what we've talked about in this video, there's a number of other things that are going to carry over. But for the conclusion of Immortal X-Men, I just wanted to make sure that we'd laid the foundation before we hopped into Sins of Sinister, because the way I see this, it's almost as if Karen Gillan has taken the liberty of fleshing out a lot of Jonathan Hickman's footnotes during Powers of 10 when we were told about the Sinister line or the Sinister timeline where he would betray Krakoa, or at least giving us a close version of that. And as we continue through Sins of Sinister, I may do a bit of going back and forth between that and Powers of 10 just to see how close they line up, because I mean, why not? And I think it was like 3 years ago, maybe more, where I did a video about Sinister's betrayal based on the little pieces that Hickman gave us at the time, and I haven't watched it since. I'm just gonna link it down below just to see how well it aged, because most of what we're getting into feels very familiar. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support, and for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/DopeSpill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.